My first ink video was all about seeing your mistakes in your drawings, and this one is going to be all about style. Ink drawing is really the clearest and most concise medium. If you don't know how to draw something, or if you don't know how you want to stylize your art, ink drawing will inflate these problems way more than any other medium. As I mentioned in my previous video, which by the way, this is part 2 of that video, so if you haven't seen that one already, check it out. But you can really watch them in any order, it doesn't really matter. I mentioned how when I first learned to draw and paint noses, I went with a more realistic approach, trying to capture every little subtle value shift possible. And it's much more of a different process in ink when you're really only working with the black of the ink and the white of the paper. And detailing the nose too much on a more stylized face, yeah, that doesn't look too good. Not really what we're going for. Don't like it. Get it out here. I don't want to say it, get it out. You can look at a ton of different ink artists and see how they all stylize noses differently, which can get confusing since there's no objective correct answer, just the right answer that suits your specific style. This goes for everything, not just noses, and it also goes for every art medium too, but there's just something about ink being the boldest and most concise medium. Like if you don't know how to draw something, there's no amount of shading or fancy rendering that can hide your potential lack of draftsmanship. As someone who's avoided ink for the longest time and has only recently started getting into it, I've never found anything that makes art improvements this clear. This is why I advise anyone who wants to get better at drawing, or really any type of art, to start practice drawing in ink. Over my many years of making art, I have developed an art style, and I have an idea of how that style would look in ink despite not having spent that much time working in the medium. But I also still struggle with simplifying things and figuring out where to add detail and where's best to leave it out. So I picked out a few ink artists in a variety of styles, and I'm going to analyze and break them down and just really see what we can learn from them. And I'm going to put what we learned to the test and create my own ink illustrations. As I just mentioned, when I was learning to draw in ink, one of the main hurdles I ran into was really figuring out what to draw and what to leave out. You can look at a bunch of artists, they all approach it very differently. So it's really about finding what you want your art to look like. Like, I love the work of Albrecht Dürer. Each one of his pieces has almost this very haunting quality to it. There's plenty we could take away and learn from his art. I especially love the detail and how each line sort of wraps around the form, not only to describe the form, but also creates a sense of depth as well. But for me particularly, I don't really want to draw faces the same way he did. He added a lot of detail to all faces to get this sort of rough look to them, and I think it works for his art for the most part, but I don't think it'll work for mine in the same way, at least not for the majority of faces I draw. Just look at this guy. Hey. And yes, I know these are woodcuts, not pen and ink, but we're treating all ink pieces the same for this video. Styles are styles, and it's all about finding yours, and just because you like someone's work doesn't mean you have to emulate them exactly. Saul Steinberg, Franklin Booth, and Rumiko Takahashi are all ink artists, but there's a very clear distinction between their styles. I'm not here to tell you that one is better than the other, or tell you that you should be doing one over the other. That's totally up for you to decide. But I will say, if you want to illustrate children's books and you're really inspired by the work of Junji Ito, you may traumatize some kids. You may do that. But say you are really inspired by the chaos of Junji Ito's work and also really like the line work of Alphonse Mucha. If you mix those things together, you might actually create something potentially interesting. Combining two what seem to be somewhat unrelated things can actually create some cool results. Or if you really are inspired by Dürer and you really want to draw hentai, struggling to figure out which lines to include and which to leave out, especially on the face, is a challenge for pretty much every artist. Just a couple lines can really change the look and age of the person or character you're drawing. But some artists draw tons of lines on the face, and they look great. What gives? I go to life drawing somewhat frequently, and if you don't know what that is, it's where a bunch of artists get together and draw from a live model. And the amount of people I see that over-exaggerate lines on the face is pretty staggering, especially this one. In something like graphite or charcoal, it's easy to indicate that line through a subtle shift of value due to a plane change, but in ink, it's actually better to leave it out since it makes the model look so much older, assuming that the model is younger. There are exceptions to this. If you're doing a style that resembles classical print engraving, there's going to be lines everywhere, but they're usually pretty thin, going horizontally across the form, and are almost acting as contour lines indicating the form of a person or object. Realistic faces tend to have more lines, stylized ones tend to have less. For my ink studies, I try to do some different approaches, ranging from stylized to more realistic, to practice both and see what I preferred. I even took my trusty ballpoint pen to life drawing to get some realism practice in. If you want to go for a more cartoony manga or anime aesthetic, adding more lines likely won't be as much use to you. Male faces tend to have more lines and details, and female and children tend to have much less since they have much softer features usually. In fact, if you look at any beautiful character you've come across while reading comics or manga, you may be surprised at just how much detail is left out on the face. Before I read Berserk, I'd seen pictures of Griffith and thought, that's a pretty lady. But then I read the story and what do you mean? What do you mean that's not like, are you sure? I'm not, that doesn't make any, I'm not. Junji Ito is known for drawing characters scarier than any nightmare, but is also known for drawing very beautiful women. His monster is detailed and chaotic, and his character is beautiful and simplistic. He believes these chaotic creatures make the beautiful characters look more beautiful, and the beautiful characters make the crazy creatures look more hideous by comparison. Just because you draw one thing simplistic doesn't mean you have to draw everything that way. Some artists will create detailed and vivid backgrounds, but leave the characters fairly simplistic. Some will leave the backgrounds as simplified as the characters, or even simpler. Some artists will detail the out of a character's hair and clothes, and simplify the face much more. Some artists use ballpoint pen, some use fine liners, felt tip, brush pens, dip pen, calligraphy brushes, and hell, even chopsticks. Some of my favorite artists that I picked out to help me along on my ink journey were Franklin Booth, Yoshitaka Amano, and Albrecht Dürer. It's really important to identify what you like and what you dislike about certain styles so you know what you want to include and what you want to exclude from your art. I challenged myself to create these illustrations without using any middle gray values or without screen tones, so really just focusing on using the black of the ink and the white of the paper to create a compelling illustration. I think this is a much harder challenge than adding more values in. And I think if you can succeed in using just those simple values, then later on down the line, if you want to add in a third value, it'll sort of feel like you're taking the training weights off, and you might be able to create something even more interesting, having done the challenging way first. Also really want to focus on leaving the faces simplified, while creating more detail in other areas of the piece. I have a tendency to go overboard with detail and add too much to the face, usually creating some uncanny results, especially in ink. So doing less is actually kind of difficult for me. The third and final thing is I really want to focus on having my shading lines sort of wrap around the form and describe the form, rather than just cross-hatching everywhere that shadows will be. In terms of shading, this is my favorite way to illustrate depth and form. I'm also trying to group together some shadows to create some more interesting and clearer shadow shapes. As you've seen throughout this video, I've been drawing a concept of Link from The Legend of Zelda in a more dark fantasy style. I feel like the dark fantasy style is one that I really like and lends itself not only to my painting style, but also to ink as a medium. My art has sort of always had that vibe to it, so I just wanted to lean fully into it on this one. At this point, I grabbed a paintbrush and was just dipping it directly into my ink because the cape was taking too long. But just to go over the materials, I'm using a dip pen with Winsor & Newton Black Indian ink, along with a Pentel brush pen to fill in some of the thicker areas. I went in first with the dip pen just to really go over my pencil lines and get those thin lines down everywhere, and then added thicker ones for the shadow areas using the brush pen, and really only used the paintbrush for that one area of the cape. Then going back in with the dip pen for the details and shading lines. Also, if there are any ink artists that have inspired you, maybe that I haven't mentioned, let me know in the comments. I'm always excited to learn of new artists. Throughout this whole drawing, I'm trying to keep in mind where the light source is coming from, and areas and lines that are receiving direct light are going to be much thinner than the areas that are facing opposite the light. They're going to be thicker because they're more in shadow. I really like referencing Yoshitaka Amano's work for this. I think he executes that very, very well. And for the detail and shading, like I've talked about throughout this video, I'm trying to keep in mind the form of the object along with the light source, and I'm trying to shade Link or the horse or the trees, whatever it is I'm working on. I'm trying to keep in mind that form and not only illustrating the light, but also describing that form as well. And I believe Franklin Booth and Albrecht Dürer are both really great examples of how to do this effectively, and looking at their work has given me some insight into how to achieve this properly, or how to at least attempt to do this properly. But overall, while it is still challenging, the process is still going somewhat smoothly. I thought there was a potential to ruin this drawing right away, but yeah, I'm happy with how it's going so far. I haven't talked about backgrounds much yet, mostly because I think getting the characters right is the most important thing, and after I have them in and figured out, I can tell what type of background it's going to be, using the same process of figuring out where to add detail and where to leave it out, trying to make the picture read as clear as possible. The branches around Link and his horse Epona will serve as almost a vignette around the entire image, and will be dark and pretty detailed. And I'll be using the same technique of using the lines to wrap around the form of the branches to create depth and form. I eventually started another illustration. This time it was a dark fantasy inspired Princess Zelda to go along with my Link piece. Admittedly, the Link piece actually went a lot smoother than expected. I thought I was going to run into way more hurdles than I actually did. Don't get me wrong, I still had my troubles with it, and I'm not saying that illustration came out amazingly perfect or anything, but I thought I would have more problems with it. I thought I'd run into more issues, and in the end, I am pretty happy with how it turned out. Even when I posted on Instagram, it got way more attention than I was expecting. I thought people kind of followed me for my paintings and stuff and didn't really care about this ink thing that I was doing, but I was wrong, I guess. I don't know why people liked it so much, but I'm thankful they did. But this Zelda one started off a little rougher than the last one. I was happy with the pencil sketch, but when I moved on to the inking, I just couldn't get the ink to do what I wanted. Damn. I feel like every stroke was just a little bit out of place and bigger than I wanted them to be, and I just assumed I was having an off drawing day. A lot of this footage is just straight up unusable because I'm just so hunched over trying to fix all my mistakes, and my head is just blocking the camera in every shot. And maybe it is hard to tell from this footage to see how bad it was going. Maybe you don't think it looks as bad. And even me looking back, I don't think it looks as terrible as I thought, but it definitely wasn't going the way I wanted. My first instinct was just to blame myself. Not sure what that says about me, but I'm not ready to unpack that yet, and that's not why we're here. I just felt like all that time I spent on the pencil drawing was being wasted on these inks I was throwing down because I just wasn't happy with how the face was turning out, and that's the most important part of the piece. But as the footage speeds up here, I figured something out. I thought to myself, you know what? I haven't changed the nib on my pen in a while. Maybe that's it. I'm working with a dip pen, and you can change the nibs out whenever you want. I really haven't spent much time working with this specific ink utensil, so I didn't realize that, yep, that was it. That was it. The nib was the problem. And when I changed it out, everything felt clearer and more precise and was going where I wanted it to go. It was a rookie mistake, but as someone who is still new to this medium, it's sort of inevitable that I'm going to make mistakes like this. Luckily, with every door that closes, another one opens, so I use this opportunity to learn how to use whiteout to fix the problems that I made in the beginning. I'm not sure how much of it was just the pen. Maybe I was having a little bit of an off day along with the trouble with the nib of the pen, but yeah, not every drawing is going to go perfect. Luckily, with the help of the whiteout, I was able to get it to a spot that I was much happier with. This whole fiasco reminded me of something I've been watching recently. It's a series called Manben. It follows the accomplished manga artist Naoki Urasawa as he goes around Japan and interviews some of the best manga artists around. They sit together and watch footage back of each respective artist working. And what surprises me the most is just how often Urasawa himself gets surprised at everyone's techniques, tricks, and ways of working. Someone who is seen as a master to so many, who has spent 30 years working in this medium, still gets surprised at techniques and just how fast some of these artists are. Also, if you're addicted to buying art supplies, probably don't watch this show, because I bought too much. But what I love about this show is watching people who have spent their entire lives dedicated to manga and ink drawing, some being in the industry for over 40 years, and just seeing how much passion they still have for it. And despite how them all being well-accomplished artists, they all work so differently. Some try to draw as fast as possible, while others take their time. Most work in silence, but then one just talks to his assistants throughout the entire process and blasts heavy metal music. Some work traditionally while others work digitally, and despite the incredible amount of time they put into drawing, how they still struggle at points. There's something a little cathartic in seeing someone who has spent decades of their lives still struggle for 2 hours to get a hand positioned how they liked. A reminder that no matter how long you've been doing something, there will still be struggles, and that's okay. I'm getting a little off track here, but I really want to tell you about the Junji Ito episode. He is not only an incredible artist, but also the most successful horror manga artist alive today. And while most of the other artists had a decently sized studio with assistants, he works alone at his desk that is under his mattress. Like I said, he has no assistants, but he does let his neighbors help out with finishing the drawings by doing the blacks and the screen tones. He does the rest himself. And yes, I said neighbors, not assistants or other artists, just neighbors. Urasawa even looked at him and was like, neighbors? And he's like, oh yeah, they're friends with my wife. Okay, that clears it up, I guess. He also loves cats, and they met at a cat cafe to do the interview. And just for the record, this was all only 7 minutes into the episode. But he also just seems like one of the coolest, calmest, and nicest people, despite drawing some of the most craziest, chaotic ever. I think what I'm getting at with all this is that there really is no one direct path to mastery for inking or any type of art. Just normal people with their own interests and ways of working, following their passions no matter how odd they may seem, and always trying to make something better than they did last time.
好きなものがあれば、それに向かって描くといいかなと思うんですけどね。好きな分野を突き詰めていくといいかなと思うんですけど。
好きなものをちゃんと極めようっていうのは、そこに愛情がありますからね。ホラーに対する愛情があるわけですもんね。
そうですね。
半端じゃないですよやっぱりね。その愛情がね。
まだまだちょっといいものをまだ今まで描いたものでまだ足りないですね。もうちょっと描きたいですね。
I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. And in its simplicity, I have found ink drawing to be one of the most purest forms of expression. Not only as a drawing exercise, but as a medium all its own. And I'm thankful for the improvements and newfound confidence it has given me, and I hope you can find value in it just as well. Thanks for watching. That was part 2, the sequel and finale to the ink drawing special. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're able to take something away from it and improve your own art. But yeah, that's sort of the goal with all this stuff. And if you did like it, please, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Really helps out with me making more videos like this. But yeah, thanks again, and keep making art. Also, I did this Ganon one to sort of complete the Triforce trifecta. I did it over the course of editing this video. I didn't have time to include it in the video. That's it, I guess.